What jobs pay extremely well, but people don't realize it? Surveying, no one sees this as a career choice. The ones doing it are retiring and there's a shortage, work isn't hard, most people should look into this. Land surveying, for example, if you want to put a fence on your property, you need to hire one to look up the county records and define the boundaries. Had to do this a few years ago and it took months to get one. A few of them explained to me they are all retiring and no one is going into the profession. Someone said it's hard to get into, but due to the shortage, I think many municipalities are willing to soften the requirements. Story 2. Quote-unquote extremely well is a relative term. I know a commercial real estate broker who made $6 million last year, nearing end of career and not his best year ever. A financial advisor friend who finally had his $1 million a year at age 50, which means he's only going up from there until retirement. Benefits provider, mid-50s, clearing $500,000 every year, basically renewing contracts. Garbage bin company owner, big construction bin, started with a truck and a bin, now mid-40s, 10 trucks, each worth over $100,000, clears $500,000 himself without driving anymore. Story 3. Judging by the common answers, it seems like the jobs that pay a fortune are the ones that leave you physically broken, demand your entire social life, or involve high-stakes sales. Most people already know about those. I think people often go looking for a non-obvious job that pays well without suffering, but that premise is fundamentally flawed. If a job is high-paying and easy, both in its day-to-day tasks and its barrier to entry, people will flock to it until it's no longer easy or high-paying. If you've identified a magical market gap, you have a massive incentive not to tell anyone about it. When dropshipping became a get-rich-quick trend, its accessibility became its downfall. The competition became so insane it was no longer a viable venture for most. I'm a software engineer. For a long time, people thought it was easy to get into and easy to do for high pay. And that was true for a while until it wasn't. It requires a specific kind of person who enjoys solving puzzles to truly thrive. Even a decade ago, when it was easy to get a foot in the door, it still wasn't an easy job for a lot of people. One area that pays more than you'd think is childcare in high cost of living cities. Most couples are dual income and you can piggyback off that by acting as a pseudo babysitter. If you charge $2,000 a month per kid and undercut commercial daycares by advertising in high economic activity areas, the money adds up fast. A lot of these nannies are likely working under the table to dodge regulations, which isn't surprising. I actually got this idea from my coworkers who have kids. I have a very real incentive to drive those costs down. Ultimately, if a job pays well and doesn't involve hard labor, being away from home, or something generally gross, it's probably a scam. Faking being rich to sell online courses on how to live the good life is a tale as old as time. Story 4. I saw a graph somewhere, I'll have to try to find it again, that plotted the number of people who can perform a particular job against the amount they are paid. As you would expect, the data followed a very neat, predictable curve. Low-paying jobs had millions of people capable of doing them, while high-paying jobs had very few people with the necessary skills or credentials. It was a standard representation of supply and demand in the labor market. However, there was one glaring outlier right in the middle of the graph, a single dot that sat far away from the curve. It represented a job that a lot of people are capable of doing, yet it is disproportionately well paid compared to other roles with similar barriers to entry. And that job was project manager. Make of that what you will. Story 5. There is a woman who lives in a small town, less than 2,000 people, not far from me, who makes an incredible living teaching swimming lessons. She teaches year-round and travels across 3 different states to work. Her business model is fascinating. Her lessons are 20-minute, one-on-one sessions held once a day for 3 consecutive days. She guarantees that your child will be swimming by the end of those 3 days. She charges an insane amount, around $400 per child, but her schedule stays absolutely booked. Her demand is so high that she has a specific sign-up day where parents wait around like they're trying to score front-row concert tickets, ready to text her exactly at midnight to secure a slot. She now has a small team that works across various locations, but she personally brings in about $26,000 a week with almost zero overhead. In a world of complex corporate structures and high-stress consulting, she found the ultimate niche, a high-value skill, a bold guarantee, and a desperate market of parents. Story 6. Experienced machinists, the ones who can actually create and improve tools and do complex tool and work, get paid incredibly well. My husband works in manufacturing, and in that world, a good machinist is worth their weight in gold. Many of the old-timers have retired or passed away, and there aren't many young people entering the field. It requires a specific skill set involving deep patience and years of learning that just isn't fostered much these days. My uncle was one of those old-school machinists. He only had a high school education, but he was one of the best in the industry. After he retired, his old company kept trying to call him back, but he eventually told them no more. And that didn't stop the company's clients, though. They began calling him directly to do specialty work. They didn't just pay him whatever he asked. They gave him the full red carpet treatment. They would fly him out on first-class tickets. put him up in top-tier hotels and take him out for excellent meals. They were happy to do it because whatever they paid my uncle was a fraction of what it cost them to have their machines sitting idle. He took those jobs whenever he felt like it, essentially using the money to finance his hobbies. He kept working on his own terms right up until the day he passed away. Story 7. Do people realize that mid-level managers in various corporate jobs pretty standardly make six figures? Marketing and adjacent roles are mostly fluff, and you can usually get into them with a generic liberal arts degree and decent soft skills, no MBA needed. Even entry-level positions will likely start you at $70,000 or more. The work can be annoying, boring, and no fun, but in my experience, it is rarely difficult. My advice? Look for random brands or companies in various industries and get that bag. I've been in and out of the consumer packaged goods industry on both the agency and client sides for a while, and it's a really decent living. For extra bonus points, find a company that makes a product you actually like. You'll often get freebies or significant employee discounts. It's a low-barrier way to reach a high-paying career if you can handle the corporate monotony. Story 8. In my final year as a solo home inspector 2021, before I began expanding my team, I earned $300,000. As the owner of the company, I still earn roughly the same today, while my technicians make over $100,000 a year through a combination of base salary and performance pay, including insurance and a 401k. The industry is in a very strong position. The older generation is retiring, and as long as you aren't in oversaturated markets like Texas or Florida, it is very possible to do well. People will always buy and sell homes due to life events like relocation, divorce, regardless of the economy. Unlike real estate, it isn't an overcrowded field. In my mid-sized Midwestern market of about 250,000 people, there are approximately 40,000 active real estate licenses, but fewer than 300 home inspector licenses, and even fewer people pursuing it as a full-time career. The work-life balance is excellent. Our inspectors typically work 2 appointments a day, 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., Monday through Friday, with optional weekend work for extra cash. We also offer profitable ancillary services that boost the average ticket price and technician pay. The primary downside is the front-loaded effort. Networking and outreach are critical just to get your name out there. Because of this, the failure rate is high. Over 80% of you inspectors fail within the first year. The barriers to entry are low, usually just a semester of coursework and some field training. And you can technically start with just a flashlight and an outlet tester. However, professionals go much further, using drones, ladders, and advanced equipment to set themselves apart. Story 9. I'm taking a slightly different angle on this. Within the world of quote-unquote high-paying jobs, there are people who don't realize that certain adjacent roles pay significantly better than their own. My example is my own life as a consultant. I am fairly high up in the promotion cycle, and I can work my butt off for a year to earn a raise of maybe 22%. In most industries, that would be considered a fantastic raise. I felt like I was doing very well for myself until I looked at the math of my partner's career. My partner is in sales. They currently make 3 times what I make. Even though I am in a field that is traditionally considered high-paying, I didn't truly realize how limited a consultant's salary is compared to the uncapped potential of sales. You can be at the top of your game in consulting, but you are still essentially trading time for a fixed rate, whereas sales plays by a completely different set of rules. Story 10. How you value a job depends entirely on how you balance time versus pay. In the Pacific Northwest, a PE teacher might only make $65,000 starting out, but they can easily max out over 6 figures with seniority. However, the real value lies in the time dividend that most people overlook. If you're effective, you keep work at work. You work 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., teaching and playing sports with kids all day, which keeps your own physical health in great shape. But the biggest factor no one talks about is the schedule. You get every state and national holiday off, plus a full summer, 2 weeks at Christmas, a week in April, and every other major holiday. If you're looking strictly at dollars and cents, it might not be the highest paying gig out there, but overall, it's a fantastic job. You get a high quality of life, and you feel like you're actually teaching the future generations how to be healthy. Story 11. I'm talking about public transit bus drivers, not the ADA or airport shuttles, but the 40-foot city buses. I routinely tell people that if you're not making $100,000 within your first few years, it's only because you don't want it. If you look into the government wages for your area, you'll likely find that there are a lot of bus drivers sitting much higher on that list than you'd expect. They get a CDL for free, though it doesn't usually include the endorsements needed for long-haul trucking, so don't get dreams of grandeur about running off to drive a semi. Here's the deal. Shut your mouth and drive the damn bus. Be courteous and master de-escalation techniques. The only drivers I've ever seen or heard of being assaulted are the ones who run their mouths and insult people who don't have much to lose. If a guy gets on and says he doesn't have the fare, so what? Enjoy the ride. If a person doesn't have $2 to their name and you call them a broke bum, well, my friend, you are now a captive audience for a butt whooping. You're seat belted in, stuck behind a steering wheel with equipment in your way. You can easily retire after a 30-plus career with great benefits and a solid pension. The hardest thing you have to do is have patience. Story 12. Medical equipment maintenance is a hidden gem. 2 years of technical schooling opens the door to working for any of the major medical equipment giants like GE, Siemens, Philips, or Zoll. These companies train you specifically on their hardware and then assign you a territory to manage. A starting salary of $65,000 to $75,000 is common, and with just a few years of experience, you can easily earn well over $100,000, especially when you factor in the great overtime pay. If you specialize in high-demand equipment like MRI and imaging systems, salaries of $130,000 to $140,000 are standard. It's a fantastic career for anyone with an aptitude for working with their hands and a love for troubleshooting. For only 2 years of schooling, the return on investment is massive. Story 13. Since folks are mentioning the military, I'll note that having a college degree means you can sign up for the military to be a commissioned officer. They have surprisingly good signing bonuses, some as high as $50,000 to $75,000 for harder-to-fill jobs. You get great benefits, free healthcare, free meals, free place to live, free work clothes, and very good retirement if you make it a career. The U.S. military is, generally speaking, profoundly pound for pound the most successful example of a socialist society in the world when considered within its own context. So if you want to raise a family, it's a generally conceptually merit-based system where a doctor and a mechanic and a food services worker can all make the same amount of money and have the same benefits, eat at the same free cafeteria for lunch, and live in the same free houses with their spouses and kids who go to the same free school, etc., etc., etc. So if you have a family, the military can be a surprisingly good option for you as an officer, since you can get free base housing and your spouse and kids will get health care too. When you calculate the cost savings from the benefits for a family and housing, plus a signing bonus and the decent pay for officers, plus other benefits like certain travel being cheaper and travel that goes with the job sometimes, you could, depending on the degree you get, wind up stationed in Europe as part of NATO and your kids growing up traveling the EU, for example. It can be a pretty good choice, especially Navy and Air Force if you're a college graduate going into a good field after college. The glaringly bad downside is possible, likely war or other military action being inevitable every so often nowadays, possible ending or being ended risks, and perpetuating the policies of whomever runs our government every 4 years. And of course, they are always cutting benefits for veterans and treat the soldiers deployed in hazardous zones like crap. So I'm not remotely saying it's purely milk and honey, but either as a single person or someone with a family, if you have any college degree, then you can almost certainly go into the military and become a commissioned officer with great benefits and a big signing bonus. So anyone fresh out of college and having trouble finding work might want to look at the military options, specifically Navy and Air Force for higher bonuses and less likelihood of dangerous deployments, a higher concern for those with families, obviously. For policing, if you even have a 2-year associate's degree, you can actually get a fast track to detective, and it also helps if you want to apply to the FBI. The FBI even offers seminar courses at colleges in most states where you can attend the seminars for credit toward a degree. So if you are partway through college but want to stop or took a couple of years and dropped out, this could also be a possibility, and it lets you avoid the street beat period if you aren't otherwise inclined to want to wear a badge, especially during times when those with badges are expected to mistreat the public and to help the government misuse its power. Story 14. Before the trade landscape shifted, I had an incredible setup. I spent 11 years making great money importing a product made by only a handful of groups, none of which were located in the US. I could just spend an hour at the breakfast table with my laptop and make $10,000. After that hour of work, I'd take my kids to school and spend the rest of the day figuring out what we wanted for dinner. I'd track down the best ingredients, whether it was a high-end steak or seafood, plan the meal, and then just rinse and repeat the next day. It required plenty of capital because everything had to be bought outright, but it was quick, easy money. Then the trade policies changed and ended the business. Now my Canadian customers are frustrated and it has become far too expensive and risky to source from China. These days, I spend my nights drinking after everyone else is in bed trying to figure out my next move. Story 15. For some reason, whether it's some sort of bizarre scam or someone who's using different names with my phone number with some sort of high professional job placement companies, I have been getting a lot of texts over this past year offering me jobs as a gastroenterologist in different locations throughout the US. They usually talk about working a few days a week and setting my own schedule. Then it mentions the salary, and I would laugh before deleting it. After a while, I did get curious and looked up about the job title online and was surprised that the annual salaries they mentioned were actually not a joke, about $500,000 or more. If I keep getting any more of these texts, I might just quit my job and pretend to be this person and take the offer. LOL. Story 16. I'll throw one in here. New home sales. Income will be highly variable based on location, but in a good location with high net migration, expect $100K to be minimum. I've been between $130 to $300K. The highest I've heard of is about $600K, but you've got to be at the right place and right time with good sales skills. Hours are pretty good for a sales job, typically 11 to 6. Weekends are required for every builder I've heard of. Overall work conditions couldn't be better. You're in a heated AC model home that's typically beautiful. Unlike general brokerage, you may not need a real estate license, and you don't need to network to make sure you sell homes, although it can help. Honestly, writing this makes me wonder why I gave that all up to go into management. Story 17. Industrial trades, work inside of refineries and chemical plants can pay really well. Depending on where you are, some of the work has less barriers for entry too. You can get in as a scaffold laborer and, if you're dedicated, learn the trade in a year. Union scaffolders make more, but a good union hall is going to have you go 4 years before you can be a journeyman. Pipe fitters, crane operators, and electricians can make more. If you're willing to work shutdowns, 6 figures is a given. Moving up to supervision is even better. Learning the trades and learning how to estimate the work can pay pretty well without the physical labor. Story 18. Elevator mechanic. The majority, like 80 to 90% of the trade, is all part of the same union in North America, and they get paid a really solid hourly wage, but the benefits on top are insane. Their health insurance for a family of 4 is $600 for the year. That's it, not a penny more, and they cover everything. They get a pension, 401k, and annuity. They're pretty much impossible to get fired after probation, and with overtime and holiday pay, etc., most of them clear at least $150,000 cash, plus all the benefits. But I know plenty of guys making over $250,000 if they played their schedule right and picked up some overtime. It's a tough job, but they do very well for themselves. Story 19. I work in histology, and most starting pays for the field are about $57,000 net pay. This was mine, no experience at all. Average salary is between $70,000 to $80,000 a year, more for specialized skills like a MOHS lab. Experienced senior techs can make upwards of $90,000. Is it as lucrative as other fields? No, but for those who don't wish to obtain a college degree, this is a great field to make a comfortable living. And the pay rates are roughly the same in most states, and these skills are in demand and in clinical labs and research roles. Job security will be good, and most hospitals have pretty good benefits. Plus, you don't need a degree to get into the field. Outside of the USA, I think histology is part of the MLS programs for clinical labs, but the USA keeps it separated. Story 20. Being a manager in an industry where post-secondary degrees are not needed, expected, or required. Things like manufacturing, machining, etc. Even nowadays, although it's less common, managers are promoted internally, no degree, no management experience, etc. You show you are smart and can do the job, that's all that matters. Higher level management positions can earn $100K plus easy. Plant manager, ops manager, etc. Very often, these people have industry experience, no degree, worked entry level at the start, and moved up consistently over time. Then once you have learned the management side, you can branch off into all sorts of things if you want. Management experience is transferable. Story 21. I made a decent living starting out as an instrumentation technician. I worked on devices that measure, for example, temperature, flow, pH, level in a tank in any given process for a manufacturing plant. There are many more measuring devices one works on depending on the process than my examples. The industries you can work in, for example, are refineries, pharmaceutical, power plants, paper mills, chip manufacturing, etc. There are many more industries that need instrumentation techs and automation folks. I made anywhere between $100 to $200K a year. That depends on where one works. I live on the West Coast and made more money than, say, in the south of Texas. But that said, you can make good money in the south depending on who you're working for. I mainly worked in biopharmaceuticals in my career. I started out in a public trade school with an associate degree, 2 years in instrumentation and process control. Helps to be a bit mechanical and decent in math. I really enjoyed the work, got decent benefits, and retirement. And if you're enjoying the video and learning a thing or two so far, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 22. Hotel banquets and events, if they do service charges. If you're a service industry worker, server, bartender, etc., look for hotel gigs, specifically in the banquets departments. About 50% have something called service charges, which is the same as a restaurant auto gratuity on tables with many guests. The difference is instead of getting it on a $300 to $400 meal, you're getting 20% off an event that often costs thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. It's split between all the servers that work that event, but it adds up quickly. I started out as a banquet server bartender, and there were many days I made $500 to $1,000 just because of these service charges while making like $10 an hour. Some weeks I'd make $2,000 plus. I'm in management now, and while my salary is good for what I consider super easy work, about $100,000 after bonuses, there's times when I'm doing employee payroll and regret taking the promotion. Story 23. Roofing sales, retail market, no door knocking, most leads are referrals. I had to put in the hard work on the roof for 10 years, but I will say that my job is very comfortable and in high demand. $150K plus working 1,600, 1,800 hours a year, in control of my schedule, work from home 50% of the time, great working in office to a working outside ratio. I never feel too cooped up in an office or taking too long working outside in the weather. It's a great balance. I tell everyone I love my job. Story 24. My brother-in-law has worked for the government for over 35 years. He started in the army and then moved to the police force. He was able to retire from the force after 30 years of service at the young age of 49. However, instead of sitting at home, he took another government job working security at a VA hospital. Because of the way his benefits are structured, he pulls half of his first retirement pension on top of a very, very nice current salary. By the time he officially retires for good at age 65, he will be pulling in 2 separate government retirements simultaneously. At this point, he only works because he gets bored. My uncle followed a similar path, except he transitioned into the forestry department after leaving the military. It's a prime example of how stacking government roles can lead to a very comfortable multi-stream retirement. Story 25. Most trade jobs can pay incredibly well if you have the skill and the initiative to move beyond just being an employee. I know numerous people who are now millionaires because they mastered a craft like bricklaying or electrical work and eventually went into business for themselves. I even know someone who walked away from a 6-figure corporate job because his side hustle was outperforming his salary. He was removing trees on the weekends and it became so lucrative that he quit the corporate world to do it full-time. He's absolutely crushing it now. The formula is simple but rare. Find a job that no one else wants to do, get exceptionally good at it, and the money will follow. Of course, it isn't easy. There is significant physical risk and the stress of running a business, but for those willing to get their hands dirty, the ceiling is much higher than people think. Story 26. When people think of oil and gas, they usually imagine the physically demanding, dirty, and dangerous work on drilling rigs. But there is another side to the field, the pumpers. These are the field crews who work for the well owners after the wells are already on stream. It is an incredibly solitary job. A pumper usually drives solo to anywhere from 15 to 50 wells per day, depending on the spacing. Their day consists of gauging tanks, coordinating transport with crude haulers, performing minor maintenance, and monitoring well performance. They're expected to know the routes and the personality of each well intimately. In fact, many pumpers serve the same wells for years, even as the wells change hands between successive operators. My guys have been on the same route since 2012, working under 3 different companies. Technically, they are contractors employed by service companies, which is common for small operators due to the cost of workers' comp, but they work directly for us. These pumpers make over $140,000 a year, including truck allowances and benefits. My foreman makes over $175,000. He's an advanced private pilot with his own plane. I'm an officer at the company, and I'd trade jobs with him in a heartbeat. Story 27. I work as a train mechanic exclusively on the night shift, and I earn about 62,000 euros a year before taxes. To put that in perspective, the median single income here is roughly 4,000 euro a month or 48,000 euro a year, so I consider myself to be in a very well-paid position. Even if I work the standard day shift with a rotating 4 days on, 2 days off schedule, including weekends, the pay would still sit comfortably above the median. My background is actually in aviation. I was an aircraft avionics assembler for 2 years before the pandemic hit. Now, most of my colleagues are electricians by trade. While my salary is solid, some of the veterans I work with make closer to 80,000 euros a year simply based on their seniority and depth of experience. It might not be the kind of extreme wealth people see in movies, but for a steady trade, it is certainly better than average and provides a very stable life. Story 28. If you want to talk about playing the system for maximum profit, look at anesthesia assistants. Specifically the locum, the traveling ones. The sign-on bonuses are wild, sometimes hitting $75,000 for just a 1-year contract. With a locum rate of $250 per hour plus moving and housing stipends, the money is staggering. You can choose your own hours and specialty, and if you're willing to be on call, you get a $400 flat fee plus hourly standby pay. Some hospital systems are clustered close together, making it possible to work at 2 separate facilities in the same week, each with its own rates and bonuses. On the high end, an AA can pull in over $550,000 a year. I have a buddy who does this. He took 8 weeks of vacation last year and still cleared over $450,000. He's a workaholic who knows exactly how to maximize the contracts. In his first year out of school, he paid back $200,000 in student loans and maxed his 401k. Last year, he paid off 2 houses. It's not a field you just kind of step into. You need a bachelor's degree and 2 years of AA school, but the barriers have lowered slightly. You no longer need the MCAT for many programs. A high GRE score will do. If I had known about this route instead of going into finance, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. I'm already steering both of my kids towards this profession. Story 29. If you know how to bridge the gap between supply and demand, you can make over $500,000 a year in the right industry. If you're good at it, you don't need a technical degree. You just need to understand a few basic frameworks like BANT or MEDIC, have a genuine interest in helping people, and accept that rejection is simply part of the process. You can run an entire career with nothing more than a cheap laptop and a phone from anywhere in the world. Modern sales isn't like Glengarry Glen Ross. Real sales is about heat-seeking the specific problems people are facing and supporting them in finding a solution. You just happen to represent the product or service that does the solving. A common saying is that a great salesperson can sell ice to an Eskimo, but that's actually the mark of a bad salesperson. A good salesperson would never do that because it doesn't solve a problem. They find the person who is actually freezing and sell them the heater. Story 30. A general contractor has to be one of the best answers for high earning potential today. Unlike so many white-collar roles, AI isn't going to be doing home repairs anytime soon. Meanwhile, people want more stuff and more home improvements, yet the average person is becoming less and less handy. As a result, repairs and professional installs have become incredibly expensive. It is an incredibly useful skill set because you can constantly expand your scope, starting with small fixes and moving into full-scale renovations as you gain experience. One of the biggest advantages is that you don't necessarily need the overhead of a massive shop or heavy machinery to get started. If you have any mechanical aptitude at all, this is the field to look into. While it takes time to build a reputation and a referral network, the market is desperate for reliable people. People are more than willing to pay a premium for good work and a contractor who actually shows up. Story 31. Corporate events management is a field where the money feels so easy, it's almost like you're robbing the client. My uncle does this professionally and he brings me on board every so often. I once saw him make $25,000 for a single event and it was without a doubt the easiest job I've ever done. We handled an event at JFK Airport for their security team. The schedule was intense. We started setup at 2 a.m. and had to stay until 10 p.m. with only a 1-hour break. But the actual work was incredibly simple. Aside from the long hours, there was no difficulty to it. The perks were great too. They put us up in a hotel right on site and we got to eat at the event, which featured excellent food. It is stupid money for what essentially boils down to logistics and being present. I still have no clue how my uncle managed to land into that niche, but the profit margins are staggering. Story 32. Food service delivery truck driving is a brutal way to make a great living. On a bad year, I make $115,000. On the good years, I make upward of $135,000. The job is grueling both mentally and physically. It requires a high-level truck driving skill set combined with the physical fitness of a pro athlete. Because you aren't just driving, you're unloading and navigating heavy ramps and dollies into tight kitchens. The barrier to entry is relatively low, just a CDL and about a year of driving experience. It's also recession-proof and safe from the looming AI trucking takeover because, well, a robot can't haul a stack of frozen crates down a narrow basement staircase in a blizzard. The money is great right out of the gate. That being said, don't do it. You will have some of the worst days of your life on this job. You'll be pushed to your absolute limit and then you'll be right back at it in 10 hours later after 5 hours of sleep and a crappy dinner. It's golden handcuffs in the truest sense. The pay is too good to leave, but the toll on your body is immense. Story 33. If you look at pay per hour rather than just gross annual income, piano tuning is an incredible path. Every tuner I've ever spoken with discusses how perfect the work-life balance is. If they need more money, they simply accept more jobs, and they are often beating those jobs away with a stick because there just aren't enough hours in the day to meet the demand. A first-year tuner makes around $150 per hour. In an average cost of living area, they might gross $40,000 a year while working very part-time, but that easily scales to $80,000 plus as they build a regular client base or move into higher-end markets. The shortage is so severe that I recently saw an orchestra offering scholarships to anyone willing to become a tuner because there was zero availability in their region. You might think there wouldn't be much demand for this in the digital age, but even if you ignore the hobbyists, the institutional demand is massive. Churches, schools, music professionals, concert halls, theaters, airports, hotels, and nursing homes all have pianos that require precise professional maintenance. It is a dying art, and the few people left doing it have total control over their schedules and rates. Story 34. I'm a firefighter in a mid-sized city, and the career path is incredibly solid. We start at around $64,000 a year, but you get automatic bumps at the 3-year and 5-year marks. Once you hit that 5-year milestone, you're making $96,000 a year. That comes with union benefits, amazing healthcare, a pension, and due to how our schedule is structured, about a month and a half of vacation time. If you're willing to put in the hours, you can easily clear $120K. We have overtime studs who live at the station and pull in up to $170K a year, though I don't do that because I value my time away from work. Speaking of time, without overtime, I only work 2 24-hour shifts a week. That leaves me with a massive amount of free time to stay home or pursue other interests. The best part, on a typical day, I'm sitting on a couch watching TV about 90% of the time. Plus, people actually like you, which is a huge difference from being a cop. It's a pretty great gig if you can manage to get hired. Story 35. Most people assume that high paying only means doctor, lawyer, or tech bro. But the real money is hiding in the jobs that nobody talks about, the ones society tends to look down on: ditch diggers, linemen, plumbers, elevator techs. and garbage collectors are all quietly making $150,000 to $250,000 a year. The math is simple. Nobody wants to do dirty or risky work, and infrastructure emergencies don't wait for business hours. Overtime stacks up fast when pipes burst at 3 a.m. I have a buddy who was an elevator mechanic with only a high school diploma. He cleared $190,000 last year. Another friend fixes gas leaks and made $160,000 just by being on call. My neighbor is a lineman who pulled in $240,000 after working hurricane repairs. These jobs are fundamentally recession-proof. People always need power, water, and working elevators. While tech workers are facing mass layoffs, these guys just keep cashing checks. The sexy jobs everyone wants, like journalism, teaching, or entry-level corporate roles, pay poorly because the supply of people wanting them is too high. Meanwhile, these trades will often train you and pay for your certifications. You start with no college debt, you just have to show up ready to work. If you can handle getting dirty and working odd hours, there's a whole world of six-figure jobs that people ignore while chasing Instagram-worthy careers that barely pay the rent. Story 36. Being a real estate agent for a home builder is like being a realtor without the constant grind of hunting for leads. You have a massive influence on the community. You decide which house goes on which lot, pick colors, and select options. You get to watch families buy their first homes and grow, but the job is harder than people realize. It isn't difficult in a physical sense, but it requires a lot of mental acrobatics to keep everything on track. The financial upside is staggering. Over the last 3 years, my wife and I cleared between $400,000 and $550,000 annually. This year has been slower, but we are still on track for $250,000. The biggest trap is the ego. It's easy to believe you're a genius and that money will never stop. You aren't, and it won't. You have to save for the rainy days because they come when you least expect them. I know too many people in this industry with $1,600 car payments and expensive lifestyles who are getting kicked in the butt by a slow market. When I tell friends outside the industries about this, I feel like I'm trying to sell them a religion or recruit them into an MLM. But the reality is, I see people smarter and harder working than me, making way less, and I genuinely wish they'd hear me out. It's a specialized path that pays like a high-end corporate executive without the same barriers to entry. Story 37. Insurance adjusting and estimating is one of those roles that can be customized to fit your stage of life. Most companies have dedicated auto adjusters, but they also use house adjusters or sublet the work to independents. I worked for a major carrier and made close to $100,000 in a fully work-from-home role, but the culture was toxic, so I took a pay cut to go back into the field. My base salary is now $80,000, but the benefits make the total compensation much higher. I get a company car, with the company paying for all gas, even for personal use, a pension, a 401k match, affordable high-quality health insurance, and a monthly internet stipend. Technically, I only clock 7.5 hours a day. Typically, I drive around and inspect 3 cars in the morning, get back home before noon, and finish about an hour of admin work. I set my own schedule daily and often don't even leave the house 1 day a week. For those who want to maximize earnings, you can join a catastrophe team. These adjusters respond to hurricanes, floods, and hailstorms and make well over $100K. The downside is that you are traveling about 75% of the year. For me, with young kids, the field-based role offers the perfect balance of decent pay and maximum time. Story 38. I'm going to tell you a dirty secret: specialized sales engineering. I'm a network and cybersecurity engineer by trade. If I were working in post-sales, also known as support, I'd be making $80K to $100,000 a year. I'd be under constant stress, always putting out fires, dealing with endless tickets, and being on call 24/7. In support, everyone blames you when something doesn't work. Now, I use the same exact knowledge and skills, but with none of the BS. I use my expertise to sell people what they actually need. It's still troubleshooting and problem solving, but instead of fixing broken systems, I listen to a client's goals and tell them what to buy. I enable the salespeople to close the deal, and for this, I make 2.5 times more what I would make in post-sales. I spend most of my week in garments on conference calls, listening to clients talk about their 6-month plans. Twice a week, I meet clients for lunch. I call it the chicken sandwich tour because every corporate lunch spot has a decent chicken sandwich, and you learn quickly not to gamble on the tuna poke bowl or the salmon. Everyone loves me because I'm giving them sound advice on new solutions rather than fixing things that should have worked in the first place. I get showered with trade show swag, drawers of free shirts, and dozens of branded water bottles. It's sickening, honestly. The people working 10 times harder than me in the server rooms are the real heroes, but in a capitalistic society, the love and the money is always given to sales. Story 39. It's a bit of a stretch because the income can be notoriously inconsistent, but social media and a designated niche is a massive hidden economy. Most people only think of generic influencing, the fashion and travel tropes, but they don't realize how many deep niches exist or the unique ways they are monetized. I've worked in the social impact space, specifically environmental education. Once an individual builds a dedicated audience around their work, I've seen them clear $5,000 for a single post or a 1-hour speaking engagement. Honestly, that's on the low end of influencer marketing. The old assumption was that impact work or activism have to be done for dirt pay, but I've seen young people create really unique, high-margin business models oriented entirely around social media strategy. They aren't just posting photos, they are acting as specialized consultants and educators for brands that are desperate to reach a specific conscious demographic. It's a way to do good and make corporate-level money at the same time. Story 40. In the early 2000s, I was making six figures in my early 20s as a mechanic. Today, top-tier techs can clear $200,000 or more. The secret isn't just turning wrenches. The key is being an expert at diagnostics, especially electrical issues, and mastering the flat rate system. So in a flat rate shop, you aren't paid by the hour you spend standing there. You are paid based on the booked time, the average time it's supposed to take to complete a specific job. If you are exceptionally skilled and find a more efficient way to work, you get paid for the book's time regardless of how fast you finish. I used to have an extreme real-life example of this. There was a common job that paid 8 hours to remove an engine to replace or reseal an oil pan. I eventually found a way to do the entire job without removing the engine at all. Under warranty, the manufacturer still paid me the full 8 hours, but I could perform the actual labor in about 30 minutes. I'd let the sealant dry for a few hours while I moved on to the next car. On a typical 5-day week, I would flag between 75 and 110 hours of paid labor while only actually being at the shop for 40 to 50 hours. Story 41. The best money is always made in the shadows. These are the jobs no one brags about at dinner parties because there's no poetry in them. You have funeral directors counting grief by the hour and long-haul truckers who know the country's geography better than the politicians who gut its infrastructure. Then there are the plumbers, God bless them, who see more of human failure in a single basement than any priest ever will, and they will bill you triple for the privilege. If you want obscene pay, don't look at the glamorous professions. Look at the quiet hustlers who know exactly how indispensable they are. Waste management, repossession, elevator repair, these are the jobs where society simply cannot function without you, yet no one wants to think about your existence while they sip their cocktails. And that's the trick. The real wealth hides in the unmentionables. It's found in the capillaries of civilization where shame, necessity, and cold hard cash all meet. It isn't sexy, and it won't win you a social media following, but it buys a house a hell of a lot faster than another MBA. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.